Hey everybody, great to have you back here in the fish tank. You know what time it is. It's Minion Masters Meta Review. That's right, we're going to have a look at the meta this season. 2.2 is the current Minion Masters version. We're going to have a look at what are the most popular Masters cards, decks, spells, all that kind of cool stuff. If you're new to this, basically what I do is every day I scrape the leaderboards, put all that data into a great big spreadsheet, and then that gives us our data that we can look at. And of course we'll compare that to last month's data and see what has changed and see if things change in a way that we expect or if they don't. This should be useful and informative for people whether you're new or experienced in the game. So without any further ado, let's dive in. And the first thing we're going to do is have a look at Master Popularity. So this is overall Master Popularity. So each master has a bar. The yellow is that master in 1v1, red 2v2 randoms, and blue 2v2 pre-mates. Now, last season APEP was dominant, but not quite so much anymore. APEP's dropped off 7.6% overall. You can see he's just the number one master overall based on the leaderboard play rate, but you can see he's dropped off a lot. So we've seen drop-offs, as I mentioned, for APEP, also quite a lot for Tronvir as well. But what have people been playing instead? Well, Valorian has gone up the most, followed by Stormbringer, and then Milloween, Wrecked, and a little bit of Mordor. So we can see, overall, APEP's still number one, Stormbringer, interestingly, the second, looks like Morelia third, and King Puff fourth. Right, so let's break that down a little bit and have a look at how that is specified through the different game modes. Now remember, we have version 2.1 last season on the left, version 2.2 this season on the right, so we can compare and contrast between them. So last season in solos, APEP nearly 30%. He's dropped off a lot. APEP down 12%. That's the biggest reduction overall, but still the number one master, but only just, as you can see on the right hand side, APEP followed by Wrecked, Valorian, and Milloween. So APEP's dropped off a lot. Wrecked has picked up a lot of the slack. Same with Stormbringer, also Valorian and Milloween. So APEP's still the master of choice in solos, but only just. Right, let's have a look at how that stacks up to 2v2 randoms. So again, we can see last season Tronvir was numero uno, and he's dropped off a lot. His play rate has basically halved. He's down 9.4%. Ratbo and Ravager also dropping off a little bit, but nothing compared to that Tronvir. So what are people playing instead of Tronvir? Well, Valorian's had a decent uptick, same with Morelia and Mordor. And you can see now Morelia, number one master choice in randoms, followed by APEP, King Puff, and Stormbringer. Just a reminder, this is based on leaderboard data. That's the only data we have access to, so things may be a little bit different depending on where you are rank-wise. Right. Oh, we forgot to mention average mana. Average mana cost doesn't really change much from season to season. If you're a new player, we suggest somewhere between 3 and 4.5 average mana. For just sort of a normal deck, and as you can see here, this is 3.9 average mana. Right, pre-mates. So again, last season Tronvir was number one. Tronvir has dropped off, not quite so much in pre-mates, but he has dropped off, but not as much as APEP. APEP dropping 10%, previously 17%, down to only 7%. So huge reductions in play rate for APEP. But the question is, why is that? I don't think he got a nerf. Maybe people just deciding to play different things? Unsure. Let me know in the comments. What do you think? Why have people stopped playing APEP? So instead of APEP, people have been playing Valorian, Mordor, Stormbringer, King Puff, and Milloween. All of those masters seeing a decent increase in play rates. So Stormbringer, the 2v2 master of choice currently. Now, let's have a look at the rarity composition. Now, nothing generally changes very much with regards to this, but we do have some changes. So remember, in Minion Masters, you have 4 card rarities. common, rare, supreme, and legendary. Generally, the more complicated a card is, the higher its rarity, not necessarily how strong it is. And that's a really important thing for everyone to remember. So you can see that decks are not just compromised of legendary cards. So lots of data on the screen. The top row is our current season, 1v1, 2v2 randoms pre-mades, and the bottom row is last season. Now, when 2.0 launched, there was some rarity changes. Some cards changed, their rarity became rarer, and some became less rare to better reflect their complication, really. Okay, so that means... oh yeah, so that changed in 2.0. I did forget about that for our 2.1 meta video. So those changes are going to be reflected in 2.1 version versus 2.2, i.e. right now. So we can see that not too much has changed. The common cards have dropped off a little bit, and there's a few cards that are particularly behind that. So Netherbats, Bearvalanche, Propeller Horde, Scrat Horde, and Stint. Just as an example, all of those cards have gone from common to rare. So even though the decks haven't changed at all, there's going to be, if you've been using those cards, less common cards. But it hasn't really changed too much. And of course, there's other cards, as we'll see when we look at the legendaries, that have gone down in rarity. So previously they were a legendary, and they are not anymore. But again, not too much has changed there. You can see that overall most decks have a smattering of all the different rarities, which is what we like to see. Okay, factions. We have 9 factions in the game. Let's see how they changed overall. So we can see Voidborn, still the #1 faction. Empyrean, still the #2 faction. Scrat, still the #3 faction. So not too much change in there. We often see some faction movement based on the particular season we're in, based on the cards in it. So for example, this season we're in an Empyrean season, so I wouldn't be too surprised. We've got a small increase in superior Empyrean play, but not too much. Biggest increases overall are Accursed. Nothing else is really increased of note, and the biggest decreases are Zenshi. Zenshi dropping off way more than anything else. That could be off the back of, although not right now, but somewhat recent nerfs to the Growth Burst Shroom. Okay, so let's break those down quickly. As always, we go through a lot of data here, so if you need to pause, screenshot, whatever you need to do, revisit, you do you. Right, so again, we've got the current season at the top, the previous season at the bottom. We've got 1v1, 2v2 randoms, and 2v2 pre-mades. So in solos, we've seen a big increase in Empyrean, and that is likely to be off the back of this season cards. We've got High Marshal Rystar, and to a lesser degree, a much lesser degree, the Crossbow Clubhouse. So way more Empyrean decks off the back of those cards. Haven't really seen that in 2v2s, but that's primarily a 1v1 thing. Maybe Rystar just doesn't work too well in 2v2s compared to how he does in solos. Okay, so Empyrean going up in solos and Zenshi going down with Scrap, but Voidborn still the #1 played faction. Remember, this is just the factions of all of the cards played, not necessarily faction decks, but just the most common faction based on the cards. If we have a look at randoms, Accursed has increased, now the most popular faction in randoms, and Accursed is kind of in a weird spot where it used to be only 2v2, and then it leached over and became mostly 1v1. Now it seems to be moving back towards 2v2, just based on the way some of the cards are balanced. So Accursed increase in Empyrean, dropping off quite a lot in randoms, which is quite surprising considering we're in an Empyrean season. So Accursed, Scrat, and Voidborn, the top factions in randoms. And in pre-mades, we can see Empyrean still the top, followed by Scrat and Voidborn. Again, Accursed, the biggest increase in pre-mades, and Zenshi, the biggest reduction. Right, let's next have a look at our wildcard usage. So, as always, our completely pointless 1v1 pie chart to show no wildcards in solos, just to remind ourselves, because, you know, some of us do like that. So we've got the green for no wildcards, the orange for 1 wildcard, and the red, I'll say, for the 2 wildcards. Remember, wildcards are basically just duplicates. So we can see that wildcard usage hasn't really changed in randoms, gone down a bit in pre-mades. So, you know, sometimes we see those change. Remember, we had some very heavily wildcarded cards that end up getting nerfed, like the Lost Legionnaires. That can really affect things. So let's just have a look at which are the most common wildcarded cards. So in randoms, we've got the Woodsman, we've got Skeleton Crew. That shows us that there's quite a decent amount of Accursed out there. Bridge Buddies, and Infray. Lady in Fray. And then in pre-mades, Gax, Restless Dead, we've got Swarmers and Doom Cleavers. So as mentioned, Lost Legionnaires got that change in the last patch where they went from spawning 2 to getting 1 plus the extra 1 that drips out of your tower at some point. That changed the Legionnaires' play rate. They were previously the number 1 wild-carded card. They're now only the number 19th wild-carded card. So big reduction there. Woodsman also dropped off a lot, still number 1 in randoms, but did have a big drop off. Remember, the Stouthearts did all get those attack speed nerfs. Restless Dead's being wildcarded way more than it was before, 5 times more, and Swarmers 3 times more. Okay, so next up we're going to look at the overall cards. The top cards overall. Bit of color coding here for you. So remember, if it's green, the rank has increased. Not necessarily the play rates increased. Generally it does mean that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. It's just the rank overall. The red means the play rate's reduced. If it is white, it means it's a new card, and if it is black, it is the same rank as before. We've got 2 numbers for each card. The one on the left is its current rank, the one on the right is its previous rank. So we can see that overall here, the top played card, Swarmers. Such a simple card, but such a heavily played card. We can see Fergus still up there, but he did drop off. Remember, he did get a nerf in the last patch. The most increased play rate is for Storm Tamer, and that's kind of awkward because it's bugged, and I feel like a lot of people are playing it because it's bugged. It does have that where once it's Cyclone Summon, it seems to always disable that card, which is very annoying if it's an expensive card. Hopefully that'll be fixed soonish. I understand it's a priority for the devs, and they'll be looking at that to get that fixed by 2.3. Also seen some increases to Squire Puff and Ardent Argus, which also with Legionnaires going up as well, that suggests that's off the back of Rise Star and the overall Empyrean influence. Biggest decrease is overall Shield God of Light. He did get that attack speed nerf in the last patch. Fergus, as we saw there, still 3rd, but the 2nd most reduced play rate. And we've also seen the Bounce Brief Flingers dropping off. They were very, very highly played. They have had some various nerfs to the Shroom and also to their own attack speed. So you can see there, Bounce Brief Flingers in 16th, drop down from 4th. Now, one thing to mention, as always, I do like to remind you guys about the rarity of the cards. Top cards, there's 27 top cards here. Only 2 of them are legendary. We've got Rise Star, brand new card there in at place 15th, and we've got Fergus in at 3rd. We've got 3 Supreme cards, 10 rare and 12 commons. Now, based on all of my data this season, there were only 2 cards that did not appear in the leaderboard data. Can you guess what they are? Let me know in the comments. 2 cards that did not appear in the data. Right, so those are top cards overall. Let's break them down a little bit. We're going to break them down into modes, 1v1, etc. And these are top cards non-spells. So that means minions, that means buildings, that means anything that's not a spell. So 1v1 made up of a lot of cheap cards. We got Netherbats now, the top played 1v1 card. Swarmers up into second. Tantrum Throwers up into third. Snake Druid, we've seen a lot of him despite getting some nerfs and maybe some further nerfs coming. And again, we see the Bounce Brief Flinger dropping down to from first place. Not sure why that says 18th. Right, so the biggest increases in solos were the Squire Path, Lost Legionnaires, and Legionnaires, again, probably off the back of Rystar. And we've seen the Bounce Brief Flingers dropping off quite a bit. Blue Golem as well, remember that's the Bounce Brief Flinger plus Blue Golem. General Strat, and also Groggy Woodsman and Woodsman dropping off as well, but off the back of those nerfs that they got. Right, randoms, we still see Fergus. We can see him there dominating randoms and pre-mades, basically. So despite the nerfs he's received, still very, very valuable. Again, biggest increases in randoms. Storm Tamer, Chief Icebreaker Bulb, Whirly Scrap, seeing a lot more play. And again, Shield God of Light, again, that nerf reducing its play rate. Fergus play rate dropping, but still the most played. And Lost Legionnaires, a big play rate reduction based on their change. And again, in pre-mades, Storm Tamer seeing more play rate. Bara as well, that's kind of an interesting one. As well as Prime Sergeant Radic in there. And again, the Shield God of Light dropping off along with Fergus. So, these are the top cards in non-spell variety in all the modes. But let's have a look at the spells. So if you're looking at building a deck, you think I need a couple of spells, which are great spells, then look at this. So overall, Beam of Doom, #1 played spell, just followed behind by Daggerfall, then Unholy Ground, Chain Lightning dropping off a little bit, used to be the #1, and Bridge Buddies. So 5 spells there, very different. Okay, so we can see in solos, the top spells of choice, we've got Daggerfall, Hypnotize, Ardent Aegis, again off the back of that Rystar introduction. And in randoms, we see Beam of Doom right up there. Lots of value from that big removal spell in 2v2. Unholy Ground and Bladestar. Bladestar, one of my favourites. Not for everyone, but when you get the grip, when you get the hang of it, boy, can you get some value out of that. That gets kind of insane. We'll also see quite a lot of Accursed in the randoms. We've got Toll of the Dead, we've got Corpse Explosion, we've got Unholy Ground. Beam of Doom really going up in randoms. Again, Toll of the Dead also going up, which just shows more Accursed overall. Bladestar still up there on the top row, but it is one of the most reduced play rate cards. Wheel of Doom, #1 there in pre-mates. Seen a lot of Wheel of Doom. It's a really fun card. Does take a little bit of skill to use it appropriately. Always fun to block it as well if you've got some good cards. Restless Dead being played way more in randoms. Ritual of Servitude also going up as well, which suggests more of those big, heavy decks. And Chain Lightning dropping off a lot. Still third in pre-mades, but a big reduction in play rate. Okay, so those are the spells that will really help fill out your deck. Now, new players are always looking at getting Legendaries. Remember, Legendaries aren't necessarily strong, they're just complex. They have a lot of mechanics, a lot of keywords, a lot of things that need to be concerned. But if you're looking to build, you've got a load of shards, you want to get some Legendaries, these are going to be Legendaries that will definitely do you well. Remember, there's always going to be some that are really versatile and you can have them in all sorts of other decks, and there's some that will just need to be built around very specifically. So look at solos, we can see there's Snake Druid, Legendary of choice, followed by the brand new Rystar and the omnipresent Jinglong. Now, Snake Druid has seen the biggest increase overall, play rate wise. Caliph also there, probably off the back of the Rystar introduction. Gax in solos as well. And Taluk suggesting some Slither influence. Shen Stormstrike's really dropped off in solos. Also Fergus, Zip Zapinator, Herald, and Chisma. Those are the Legendaries that we've seen much less of. Now in randoms and pre-mates, you can see again, Fergus is up there, followed by Wheel of Doom. In both of them, we've got Bolf in randoms, we've got Bara in pre-mates. Bolf's gone up a lot in randoms for whatever reason. Razor Squadron, Wheel of Doom, Rendrath, and Lady in Frey, the biggest increases in randoms. Fergus has dropped off the most, but still is number one. That just shows how much he was played originally. Bara's gone up the most in random, pre-made, sorry, and again Fergus is the most reduced, but still number one. So overall, Fergus the most played legendary, followed by High Marshal Rystar. There's quite a bit difference there. Then Wheel of Doom, Snake Druid, and Bara. So as I mentioned before, some of the cards changed in rarity. So Hypnotize and Corpse Explosion, they went from legendary down to supreme. So if you were expecting to see them here and you'd seen them in this section before, that's why they're not here. Okay, so we've looked at all the cards, but what do cards make? Decks. So let's have a look at the decks. So these are some top decks. You know, you could use different criteria depending on what you define as being a top deck. These are basically decks that were very high up on the leaderboard, like within the top 1, 2, or 3 places, and comprise of very highly ranked cards. They're not necessarily in an order, but these are some strong decks we've seen out there. So the first deck is the Milloween deck. We've seen that at the top of the leaderboard for quite some time. Hypnotize getting a lot of value against the heavy melee elsewhere. Snake Druid as well. So that's an interesting one. Corpse Explosion and Resonating Blast Crystal, which we're definitely seeing more of since the changes a couple of patches ago. And then we have probably a deck that we're more familiar with from last season. It doesn't really seem to have changed much. Remember, we've had the nerfs to the Stout Hearts, so the Woodsman and the Caber Tosser and the Groggy Woodsman not hitting as hard as they could before. But we've got Jing in there. We've got the Bounce Reflinger with the Shroom. We've got the Blue Golem, so pretty standard stuff. Next up, in third place, we have the Valorian. So we can see we've got some cheap cycle cards at the start there. We've got the Jing. Remember that you tend to find the Jing and the Heal Puff together because the Heal Puff gives you the Zenshi flow on the Jing super easily. So this is like super cheap. And then it's got Rystar, and then it's got Yahoon in there. Remember, Yahoon can pick up the Shroom from the Growth Burst Mushroom Giant Growth buff. And Rystar is the new card. You can see Rystar not getting maximum value from his 10 Centurions, but it seems like that's the best way to play him. Okay, next up we have a Stormbringer deck. We can see some nice cheap cards there to put some pressure on. We've got some range, and then we've got the Gax. So basically you're just trying to get your opponent to put a lot of stuff on the field, and then you get your Gax value. Doesn't feel like a real face damage push deck. It feels like a Gax over constant Gax value, and eventually just running your opponent over. And then we have Morelia, much more aggro deck. We've got the Rammer in there, we've got the Gax, we've got the Rage, we've got the Cleaver, and Rystar as well. Ardent Argis there. Interesting, you could put it on the Rammer maybe to get some behind enemy line troops, or you can put it on Rystar. So those are what I'm going to say the top decks in 1v1. If you play those, then you may get some really good results. Remember, you know, decks are on paper one thing. It takes definitely some time and some understanding to get the best value out of them. New players will do okay with these decks, but they will definitely have a lot of room to learn how to get the most out of them. Right, let's have a look at some random decks. So we tend to find more AoE here. There's my deck at the top. I've been playing this for a good while. Got to number 1 on leaderboards in randoms. Always a good time. And Bladestar. I started recording some Bladestar clips, so maybe I'll put together like a Bladestar compilation. Let me know in the comments if you're interested in seeing some good Bladestars. Maybe for educational purposes. How to become a Bladestar god. Right, so that's my King Puff deck at the top there. Lots of fun. Really enjoy playing that deck. It's pretty lightweight. It's not for everyone. You do have to play it carefully. But if you play it properly, you can get a lot of value out of it. Right, APEP is up next. Again, some cheap cards. And then we got the meat with the Kabutosh and the Fergus. And then, of course, we've seen Beam of Doom being the #1 spell at the moment. Then we have an Accursed deck. This is a Morelia Accursed deck, Toll of the Dead. So you really just want to cycle through that as quickly as possible. Get as many Tolls out as possible. And then you get that big power spike around perk 3 with your dragon. Hitting Accursed Ascension. And then so that's pretty much it. Right, Tronvir is next. Again, a bunch of cheap cards. We got some power there in the Assassin. Storm Tamer. I'm not a fan of people playing Storm Tamer, especially if they know it's bugged and they're playing it specifically because it's bugged. But it is an awkward card to play into, but the bug makes it 1,000 times more difficult because you're just terrified of any of your expensive units getting anywhere near it. And then we have a Stormbringer deck, lots of ranged minions. We got some tanks in there, we got some bridge control, just sort of regular Stormbringer stuff. And then we move on and have a look at our pre-mades. So we've got an APEP deck at the top, Beam of Doom, Wheel of Doom. Those are the spells we've seen a lot in our previous slides. Again, we've got Stormbringer. This is kind of a tankier Stormbringer deck. We've got the Zip Zappinator in there, which can be annoying as heck to play against. And we have another Tronvir deck. Again, with Storm Tamer. Seeing a lot of people running 3 Storm Tamers just feels really bad. It feels like if they're running 3 of them, they're definitely abusing the bug. Then we have some Valorian with our new friend Rystar. So, getting some decent value from his 10 Centurions. Remember, he gives you 3 or 4 of them. You got the 4 Legionnaires, then you got the Lost Legionnaires. So you're getting most of the value out of Rystar there. And then we have a Ratbo deck. Always fun to see Ratbo. I really wish they would do something to Ratbo's auto attack. We've said it a million times. His auto attack just feels so bad. But lots of Horde in there. Lots of Scrats. Lots of potential power for that Daka. Veilstalker's really annoying to deal with. And we got some tanks, of course. Right. So, if you want to try out some of those decks, do so. One thing to remember with the pre-made decks is some of these people will play pre-mades primarily with one specific person, with one specific deck as a partner deck. So they may or may not work as well with other decks. That's just one thing to consider. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to have a look at the cards per master. Now, we've already gone through a lot, so I'm just going to whiz through these. Again, if you want to pause the video, screenshot, whatever, do so. So we have, again, the top cards per master, per mode. And remember, pay attention to the number of decks at the bottom to give you an idea of how many decks have been used in the data, to give you an idea of if it's a decent amount of data or if it's just based on sort of one person's deck. Right, so APEP, I'm going to whiz through these. Next up we have Diona. Lots of Azali there, but as you can see, the 2v2 randoms, only 5 decks, so that could be just basically one person's decks being taken into account. Next up we have King Puff. As you'd expect, prop Scrats everywhere. Lots of multi-units. Then we have Milloween. Lots of Accursed cards. Accursed Milloween is very strong. I've been playing that a lot this season as well, to be honest. Just got to GM in solos with that. It's kind of a bit of a meh deck, but it's pretty strong. It's pretty straightforward. Next up we have Mordor. We'll see lots of heavier units for Mordor, and of course we see Ritual of Servitude, as we would expect. And one thing to remember with Mordor is he doesn't revive puffs or illusions, so you can get away with running those, and sometimes it's encouraged. Next up we have Morelia, which again has Accursed basically everywhere. She doesn't have a huge amount of Accursed synergy, but that's just the way it kind of goes. Next up we have Wrecked. Rect is far more popular in solos than in any of the 2v2 game modes. Ratbow. Scrats everywhere, as again you would expect. Lots of Horde. Ravager. Very aggro in solos. Aggro doesn't work quite so well in 2v2, unless you're both playing it. But we can see lots of Zenshi there in the 2v2 randoms for Ravager. Setsu, lots of spell synergy, as you would expect. Bladestar represent. Now we see Stormbringer. We should, as we would expect, lots of ranged units, lots of Crystal Elves and Outlanders in there to get that perk 2 synergy. Tronvir. Tronvir, I'm not really sure how you would describe a Tronvir deck. It's kind of like just like a Diona deck. Not really too much different, but just his runes just do way more than her traps kind of ever would. Valorian, lots of Legionnaire stuff, lots of Empyrean stuff. Again, he doesn't really have any direct synergy like he did originally, but these mid-ranged sort of tanky-ish units do really like his heals. Next up we see Volko. Solo Volko tends to be pretty aggro. One thing I've noticed is, remember this season in the Season Pass, there was a new Volko skin. I haven't seen it one time. So have people not unlocked it, or are people just not playing Volko? And there we have it. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of our Minion Masters Meta review for patch 2.2. Let me know in the comments if you like this kind of content, if you find it useful. Is the data that I'm seeing here representative of what you're seeing out on the in the game? Because of course we're just looking at leaderboard data. That may be very different to the data that is below that. Would be nice to get our hands on actual play rate, win rate data for cards overall, but that's not something the devs want to do now, and I don't know if that's ever going to change in the future. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Let me know what you think. As always, if you're enjoying the content here in the fish tank, make sure you give it a thumbs up, like, comment, and subscribe. Engage the Matrix. Let's share this video with our friends, and let's keep playing Minions. I haven't streamed too much recently, but I have played quite a lot of Minions, and there is a lot of negativity going around with the state of the game. But I can play it for hours without many issues at all. Most of the issues I have are just these annoying gameplay bugs that are not being prioritized, like the Storm Tamer. But that is being prioritized now, but it has been existing for way too long. But that should be fixed soon, and hopefully they'll do a good sweep of getting all these gameplay bugs fixed, and then we can not have any of those. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm Bad as Fish, and I'll see you again soon here in the fish tank.